For centuries, the figure of Jesus of Nazareth has stood at the epicenter of Western civilization, inspiring billions, shaping cultures, and provoking endless debate. To Christians, he is the Son of God, the Messiah, the very cornerstone of their faith. But what about history? Beyond the sacred texts, beyond personal conviction, what does the historical record tell us about the man from Galilee? Was Jesus a real person, or is he merely a myth? A compilation of ancient hopes and legends. Today, we embark on a journey not of theological debate, but of historical inquiry, to explore the compelling evidence for Jesus' existence that emerges from the dusty annals of the ancient world. Our aim is to sift through the fragments of the past, to listen to the voices of historians, philosophers, and even adversaries, and to discover what they reveal about the most influential life ever lived. Before we delve into specific sources, it's crucial to understand the landscape of ancient history. Proving the existence of any individual from the first century is often a formidable task. Records were scarce, preservation was haphazard, and biases were rampant. Major figures like Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar have contemporary mentions, but even their biographies were often written long after their deaths and sometimes coloured by legend. The expectation for Jesus, therefore, should be consistent with how we evaluate other historical figures of his era. We're not looking for a modern biography with birth certificates and personal diaries, but rather for credible mentions in diverse, independent sources, both friendly and hostile, that attest to his life and impact. This established historical standard provides the framework for our investigation. One of the most significant non-Christian references comes from Publius Cornelius Tacitus, arguably the greatest Roman historian. Writing around 115 AD in his monumental work, the Annals, Tacitus describes Emperor Nero's scapegoating of Christians for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. He states, and I quote, "Christus, from whom the name Christians had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus." This passage is pivotal. Tacitus, a Roman senator writing over 50 years after Jesus' death, had no sympathy for Christians, whom he described as adhering to a deadly superstition. Yet he clearly confirms several key historical facts. The existence of Christians in Rome, their identification with a figure named Christus, and his execution under Pontius Pilate during Tiberius's reign. This is a powerful, unbiased attestation to Jesus' historical existence and crucifixion, coming from a source entirely independent of Christian belief. Further corroboration emerges from another prominent Roman official, Pliny the Younger, the imperial governor of Bithynia in Asia Minor. Around 112 AD, Pliny wrote to Emperor Trajan, seeking advice on how to handle the rapidly growing Christian population in his province. He details their practices, noting that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day before dawn and sing responsively a hymn to Christ as to a god. He also mentions their refusal to curse Christ, even under duress, and their commitment to ethical conduct. Pliny's letters, like Tacitus's, come from a position of Roman authority, examining a group they considered troublesome to the established order. His testimony implicitly confirms that Christ was a real figure, central to a distinct and rapidly spreading religious movement, whose followers worshipped him as divine. This wasn't a shadowy cult. It was a movement with a clear and historically identifiable origin point that was causing significant social and political ripples. Perhaps the most extensively debated non-Christian source is the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, who wrote his Antiquities of the Jews around 93 to 94 AD. Josephus mentions Jesus twice. The first and more extensive reference is known as the Testimonium Flavianum. While scholars widely agree that later Christian scribes likely embellished parts of this passage, making it sound too overtly Christian, there's a strong consensus that an original core existed. This original core would have stated that Jesus was a wise man, a teacher who attracted many followers, both Jews and Gentiles, that he was accused by leading men and crucified by Pilate, and that the tribe of Christians continued to exist. Even if we filter out the likely interpolations, Josephus still provides crucial testimony from a Jewish perspective, confirming Jesus' leadership, his following, his crucifixion, and the continued existence of his followers. Importantly, Josephus also explicitly mentions James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, a reference largely considered authentic and unchallenged. This direct family link from a Jewish historian provides a powerful historical anchor for Jesus' reality. Moving beyond these major players, we find additional, albeit briefer, mentions that reinforce the narrative. Mara bar Serapion, a Syrian Stoic philosopher, wrote a letter to his son sometime after 70 AD, urging him to pursue wisdom. He compares the persecution of the wise by their oppressors, listing Socrates, Pythagoras, and then pointedly asking what advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king. While not explicitly naming Jesus, the context strongly suggests a reference to him, placing him among revered wise men tragically martyred. Furthermore, certain passages in the Babylonian Talmud, a central text of Rabbinic Judaism, also mention Yeshu, a Hebrew name for Jesus. These passages, though hostile, describe Yeshu as a sorcerer who led Israel astray and was executed on the eve of Passover. While written centuries after the event, these references reflect earlier Jewish traditions and implicitly confirm Jesus' existence, his influence, and his execution, albeit from a highly critical standpoint. The very act of attempting to discredit Jesus implicitly acknowledges his historical reality and impact. While the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are undeniably foundational to Christian faith, they are also recognized by historians as ancient biographies, albeit with theological aims. Their detailed narratives, geographical precision, and inclusion of embarrassing details are all hallmarks that lend them historical weight. However, to bolster our historical case, let's turn to the earliest Christian writings, the letters of the Apostle Paul. Written between 50 and 60 AD, just 2 decades after Jesus' crucifixion, these letters predate the written Gospels. Paul, a former persecutor of Christians who became their most zealous advocate, was a contemporary of Jesus' disciples and his brother James. In his letters, Paul speaks of Jesus' human lineage, his birth, born of a woman, born under the law, his Jewish heritage, his Last Supper, his crucifixion, and crucially, his resurrection appearances to Peter, the 12, and over 500 others. He even directly refers to James as the Lord's brother. Paul's eyewitness-adjacent testimony, his detailed knowledge of Christian practices, and his unwavering conviction form a powerful argument for the historicity of Jesus and the core events of his life, often considered by scholars as among the most reliable sources. While we don't expect to unearth Jesus' personal effects, an unrealistic expectation for anyone from that distant era, archaeology plays a vital role in contextualizing and corroborating the historical world depicted in the New Testament. Discoveries like the Pontius Pilate inscription, found at Caesarea Maritima, naming Pilate as the prefect of Judea, confirm a key biblical figure. The discovery of ancient Nazareth and Capernaum, as well as first-century fishing boats on the Sea of Galilee, lend credibility to the settings of Jesus' ministry. The ossuary of Caiaphas, the high priest mentioned in the Gospels, has also been discovered, providing tangible links to biblical characters. These finds, while not directly proving Jesus' existence, do something equally important. They demonstrate the historical reliability of the broader narrative, showing that the people, places, and customs described in the Gospels align remarkably well with the archaeological record of the first century. This grounding in verifiable historical reality strengthens the case for Jesus as a real figure operating within that tangible world. Perhaps one of the most compelling, albeit indirect arguments for Jesus' historicity lies in the sheer impact and unprecedented growth of the Christian movement itself. How could a religion centered on a crucified Jewish carpenter, executed by Roman authorities as a common criminal, explode across the Roman Empire within decades of his death, ultimately transforming Western civilization if he were merely a fictional character? The early Christians, including figures like Peter and Paul, were not inventing a comforting myth. They were proclaiming a radical message based on what they believed to be historical events: Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Their willingness to endure persecution, torture and martyrdom for their convictions speaks volumes. People die for what they believe to be true, not for a story they know to be fabricated. The rapid and transformative spread of Christianity, against all odds, is a testament to the belief in a very real, very powerful founder, whose message resonated deeply and irrevocably altered human history. It's important to acknowledge that historical evidence, by its very nature, is rarely absolute proof in the way a mathematical equation is. There will always be room for different interpretations and degrees of certainty. However, when viewed collectively, the non-Christian and Christian sources, combined with archaeological corroboration and the undeniable historical impact of the movement, paint a consistent and compelling picture. For historians, the question is not if Jesus existed, but what kind of historical figure he was and what precisely he did. The overwhelming consensus among mainstream scholars, both religious and secular, is that Jesus of Nazareth was indeed a historical person. For believers, this historical foundation only strengthens a faith that transcends mere facts, finding its ultimate expression in a personal relationship. But for those who seek to understand the origins of this faith, history offers a robust and resonant voice that speaks volumes. So, after our journey through ancient texts and historical analyses, what can we confidently say? We've seen that Roman historians like Tacitus and Pliny the Younger, along with the Jewish historian Josephus, all refer to Jesus and the early Christian movement within decades of his life. We've explored how early Christian writers like Paul, contemporary with many who knew Jesus, spoke of him as a historical person, detailing key aspects of his life, death and resurrection. And we've noted how archaeology affirms the historical reliability of the world in which Jesus lived. The cumulative weight of this diverse evidence strongly affirms that Jesus of Nazareth was not a mythical figure, but a real man who lived, taught, was crucified, and whose life sparked a movement that changed the course of human history. His impact, enduring for 2 millennia, is unparalleled, rooted in the undeniable reality of his existence. If this exploration has deepened your understanding or sparked new curiosity, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who might benefit, and subscribing to our channel for more thoughtful discussions on faith, history, and culture. What aspect of Jesus' historical impact do you find most compelling, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. God bless you. Bye.